Carlson?
Okay, well, I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Kalamazoo Lake Harbor Authority, Tuesday, December 9th, 2025 at 6 p.m. Could we have a roll call?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Engel, absent. Gnasiak,
Present here.
North,
Present.
Peterson,
Present.
and Chair Waskin.
Present.
It might be of note, if it's all right, Madam Mayor, and Mr. Chair, I heard from Douglas that they're working on some appointments to the board. Mr. Donovan has since left the council and then they were reviewing your bylaws and it appears they were like, oh, we're supposed to only have one council member. And so Mr. Freeman, I think, is kind of fallen off. So there's a couple vacancies as well that they're working.
This will be my last meeting too, then.
Oh,
We're gonna have Jeff West, who is our newly elected council member, take our elected position, and I'm waiting on another person that's not elected to agree to be on, so.
very good. Okay, the next on the agenda is to approval of the agenda for December 9th, 2025. Can we have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the December 9th, 2025 agenda as printed.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
I
Approved. Then approval of the minutes of September 9th, 2025, which should have been in your packet. Do we have any changes or additions? Then do we have a motion?
Set up last meeting,
Yeah.
because it says I was here and I was not, and neither was Greg.
Well, the last meeting was
Yeah, last meeting was.
meeting when we didn't have a quorum. So,
Yeah, we didn't have.
Yeah.
No corrections then.
okay. So do we have a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the September 9th, 2025 minutes as presented.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Okay, and approval of invoices. We have no bills, so.
We have no money.
Yeah, we have no money, we have no bill.
Well, it's good to, no bills, so if you have no money. Yeah.
Okay, public communications. Any written communications, Ryan?
None that we received, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and no public other than our speaker who's on the agenda. So we can move right to new business. And Greg, you have the podium. Very good. Is this working? Can you hear me? Does this go over the?
It should, yep.
Perfect. Excellent. So we are going to bring up our presentation. So at the last meeting, we had discussed reviewing the harbor management plan that was prepared, actually was presented last to the Saugatuck City Council in September of 2016. So about 9 years ago, a little over 9 years ago. And yeah, there we go. And so it's really interesting to go back and look at this because is how we've seen this go through the cycles. So want to just, are you going to drive or?
Just tell me whenever you're ready for next slide.
Let's just keep on going here. So the purpose of this plan, we were hired, this was actually commissioned by the city of Saugatuck at the time. It was not, so we had done a bunch of work for Douglas. We had done work for the predecessor organization. What was it before it was KLHA? There was a predecessor organization in 2010 and 11 for a brief period of time. But it was more led by Douglas at that time. And then we've done a bunch of different things. But this particular study was commissioned by the city. And this is the statement that is out there. Dr. Meadows is a professor at Michigan Tech and probably the most respected academic in the Great Lakes. And this is the main point about our harbor here is it's it naturally, in its natural form, this is the world's most perfect sediment trap. And the only reason it stays navigable is through continual human intervention. And if we ever stop with the dredging and the management, it will ultimately revert back to its natural course. And over time, it will fill in. We'll end up with mostly, it'll be like the east side of 196, essentially. There will be a lot of sediment. There will be a natural river corridor, and there'll be shallows and so forth. Or like Wade's Bayou, very similar to that. And that's just, it's always interesting. Many people, since it has been managed this way since 1880 back through 1930, it's beyond most of our memories that it hasn't always been like this. And some people would assume that it's been a lake that is now in danger somehow from these natural processes, when in fact we had done a human intervention and created this. So about 36,000 cubic yards of sediment enter the basin or enter the harbor every year, which is a football field 20 feet deep. That's a lot of sediment. And maintaining that navigable depth is continual human intervention. The unpredictable water levels make it sometimes more of an issue, many times less of an issue. Of course, there's a contamination, which we've spoken about many times. Next slide, please. So the process at this time was we wanted to review all of the existing studies. I'm not aware of any studies that have been completed since this one was done, but there was a number of studies starting in 2007, and then we did a couple of studies in 2010 and 11. We looked at the different alternatives. We engaged the permitting agencies. And actually, for probably the only time in the history of my work with, at the time it was DEQ, it's now Eagle. We actually had a preliminary meeting where they actually, without having submitted a permit application, said, no, we're not going to permit that. They don't give you a yes or no typically. We'll talk about that in a minute. So we were talking about identifying practical solutions and outline action steps to move forward. Next slide, please. So the partners and participants of this study was obviously KLHA and the city and the village of Douglas. Allegan County, we met with, so DEQ, it's now Eagle. DNR, it was a very, very collaborative effort to talk to just about everybody who has anything to do with managing our waterway. Next slide, please. And so there's a few slides here. So this is 1997. And the thing to notice here in particular is Wade's Bayou and the area east of 196. Let's go to the next slide. So that was 97. This is 2013, which is when we had record low water. And you can see a dramatic difference in the shape and form. You'll notice in particular the sandbar in the middle of Kalamazoo Lake there, or the kind of the lower right portion of it, Wade's Bayou. And of course, everything east of 196 was mostly plants. Let's go to the next slide. This was 2016. At the time we did the study and the water was starting to come up. We had, I would say it's, if not record or not unprecedented, a very uncommon rise between the winters of 13-14 and 14-15. As you recall, those were winters much like the one we're encountering right now. So one of the things that drives the change in the water levels is it's all precipitation in and evaporation out. That's probably 99+% of what drives our water levels on the Great Lakes. A lot of people talk about the water going over Niagara Falls or through the locks in Chicago. Those are all rounding errors. It is so difficult to comprehend just how large the lakes are, that the amount of water that flows out is it's just infinitesimal compared to the evaporation. So when we have those very, very cold winters, we have less evaporation in the wintertime. And this has been interesting because since this was done, there's been a lot of studies. There's been no consistent studies on evaporation itself. So one of the things that's interesting about this conversation is, yes, when we have heavy ice cover, we have less evaporation. But the physics of the process of water going from a liquid to a solid state involves a massive amount of evaporation. That is a result of that physical change in state. So that happens early when it turns to ice versus continually over the course. And somehow we still end up with less evaporation when we have more ice. And the agencies are now starting to study evaporation more. They don't really have monitoring stations the way that we do for water levels and other things. So that's been interesting, and that's evolving. So that's 2016, and the water is starting to come up. Let's go to the next slide, which is 2020.
Yeah.
And we had no problems in 2020, other than we had all the other problems that we had is when we hit record highs. So the only
Our gift.
Yeah.
Our gift.
Well, the challenge, and we actually had this conversation when I made this presentation, the fact that the waters were rising. The biggest risk to this community is always when it's not a problem, we don't think about it. And it takes so long to establish these plans and processes, funding streams to deal when we get to another 2013, that the high water sort of, oh, we don't have to worry about it right now. And so with a little bit of luck, this winter being what it is, hopefully we'll have very wet springs. The other thing that correlated with the record rise in water levels was two very, very cold winters in 13-14 and 14-15. And then between 15 and 20, we had 5 of the 7 wettest springs on record. And so when you talk to the climate scientists in 2010, 11, 12, the projections were, we think it's going to continue to go down, that we're in this new cycle of warmer winters, more evaporation, and the lakes are not only going to stay down, they're going to keep going down. And then, of course, 6 years later, it went to a record high. And so now the answer is we're going to see more volatility. And the prediction now is that it will probably stay within the historic range of about -1 to +5. It's the rough range. It's about a 6-foot range. I translate that as the climate science. We don't know what it's going to do. It's just going to do it more unpredictably than it has over the last 120 years. Let's go to the next slide, which is 2025. And you can see we're kind of back in the middle. We're back to about, at the time this photo was taken, that's just about long-term average, just maybe a few inches below long-term average. So earlier in the spring, people.
You know
were saying,
what, you know what month that was?
May. That was May.
Okay, because we've lost a lot of waters
Yep,
since May.
absolutely. Yep. So in May, we were very close to long-term average. We're now about 6 inches below. Well, actually, I've updated it here in just a minute.
Okay.
So this is pretty close to long-term average. That doesn't mean that that's where we are most. It's just kind of, there's no, if you look at the record, just because we have been going down doesn't mean we're going to go down until we hit a record low before we come back up. It can go up and down at any given point. And I'm optimistic with the cold that hopefully we'll have a repeat of what broke the low water cycle before. So this is where we are today. And my concern, of course, is that if it continued to go back down to 13, we might have in 3 or 4 years a much bigger problem that we had back then. So next slide. So this was the water level charts when we did this in 16. And so if you haven't seen this chart before, there's 2 charts here. The top one is from 1918 to 2016, and that red line is long-term average, and the blue is what did the water levels do. It says Lake Michigan Huron because hydrologically they're one lake. Don't tell Lake Huron, it really isn't its own lake. There's really only one lake, but we give it 2 names. And you can see that cycle. The chart below, the blue dashed line is the long-term average. And what you're seeing here is a period of years. And so you see the verticals. Let's actually go to the next slide. I think it might be a little bit easier to see. Yeah, I have more information on this one. So this is from today. I actually drew this today. And so one of the things that you'll notice on that high level, you now see that giant peak on the top one where we had the record highs in 2020. So what you're seeing on these slides is the blue dashed line is the long-term average. Red is the actual measurement, and these are monthly means. So they take the water levels every day for the month. What's the average? And that's what you get for that month. The numbers that you see up in the top, so there's a bunch of 2020s. And if you look at the very top, it's 2024, 2025, and we're now in 2026. And it's always a few months behind. You're now seeing, or it's projecting forward, excuse me. So the 2020s that you see up higher, that's the record high in what year and what the water level was in that record year. So we're now at where that red line is, and in 2020, we were a solid 3 feet higher, way up there. So you see up in, if you start under the 2025, under January, 2020 was the record, 2020 again, 2020, all the way until October, where in 1986, we had this huge outlier in October of 1986. That's the peak in 120 or 108 years or so. And then we have the record lows. You can see here in January of 2013 was the record low. And so we're right in the middle. The green dashed line is what they're projecting. So the projections for next year as it stands right now are for us to be about a foot below long-term average next spring. The red shaded area is the range of what climate predictions you do. And the Corps will tell you that 98% of the time they're in that red shaded range. So with a little bit of luck, we'll be at the higher end of that and get pretty close to normal long-term average. So that's where we stand. And it's very normal in the course of the year. We always bottom out in January, February, March, and we always have our peak in July, August, that time frame. And that's the natural cycle where it naturally goes up and down about a foot over the course of a year. And then we have these longer term cycles, as you can see up top, where we go from maybe 3 feet below to the average and 3 feet above.
Greg, so you said right now we're about 6 foot below the long-term average.
6 inches.
Or excuse me, six-
Well, actually, as you look at it
6
today,
inches.
we're probably closer to 10 inches as of today.
Yeah.
Okay, and then, but you think that over the period, because of the cold winter, we will get to about a foot below the
We're tracking about 10 inches below, and the green line suggests maybe about a foot below. So somewhere in the,
by when? Just for the whole time?
that's just tracking for May.
Okay.
And so, but you see that red shaded area, if we have a particularly hard winter and a wet spring, it could climb much closer to average. So I would suspect next year, What this chart is telling you is that next May, we should be within, at best, 6 inches below long-term average, and at worst, about 18 inches below long-term average. So it looks like we'll still be below average, but still reasonably close to it. Not what I consider low water, but it's concerning. So. The one thing that those 5 wet years, that's also part of the climate change. I think I'm allowed to say climate change in this room. I'm not allowed to say that in many rooms. I'm not going to debate what's causing it, but it is real. What we're getting is a lot of variability and a lot of volatility. And so when we have these incredibly wet springs, and what happens is the ground gets saturated and it has nowhere to go. So the first season of very wet replenishes all the groundwater tables and saturates the ground. The second season is when you get these huge rises because it just has nowhere to go. So that's the thing we're always paying attention to. Coastal engineering firms like myself are busy when it's really high and busy when it's really low, and when it's in the middle, everybody's like, hey, it's fine.
I got a question. Can you go back to the previous slide? So you mentioned like June and July are the kind of like the peak where it's highest.
July, August.
Is that because of Lake Superior and that watershed? I heard
No.
something that,
This specifically is Lake Michigan,
down.
Lake Huron. The amount of water that's coming in from that that's not what's driving it.
okay,
It's just there's a chart like this for each one, and they all show pretty much the same patterns. The Lake Ontario is a little bit different because it does have a controlled, it's called the IJC, the International Joint Council. Probably the best thing that has ever happened to the health of the Great Lakes is that Canada owns half, because if they didn't, we would have a pipeline to Arizona by now, guaranteed. And the fact that the International Joint Council, and just for reference, it is not legal for anybody to remove water from within the Great Lakes drainage watershed outside, with the exception of Nestle, who does it from Big Rapids. There are a few communities west of the line in Wisconsin that can draw out, but their stormwater goes into the watershed, where they're actually out of the watershed, but their stormwater is piped in, and so they have an exemption. So if that ever changes, that would be a major impact on the lakes. But again, it's still fun. It's very difficult to grasp. You can fit all the other Great Lakes in Lake Superior plus a couple more Lake Eries, and I guess and I believe the number is if you spread Lake Superior's water over the entire U.S., it'd be like 18 inches deep or something, or 4 feet deep. It's some crazy number. It's a phenomenal amount of water, but it is a finite resource. Next slide, please. So this plan was to try to look at all the available alternatives to manage sedimentation, engage the agencies to find the best plans, and identify the best strategy. The 2000 study, for example, said, hey, it's solved. It's only $40 million. That's not really a solution because there's no $40 million. So let's go to the next page. So that was 2005 was the comprehensive plan. There's a bunch of different studies. I'm not aware of any other studies from 2016. There may have been a couple, but not specifically addressing the lake. Next slide. So these were the early studies, and from 2007, we'll go through these quickly, but the primary thing of these studies introduced 2 concepts. One was channelization, the idea of what would naturally occur if we did nothing, eventually it would channelize. You'd have a river that is deeper, and you'd have shallower areas, and you can go to the next couple of slides, you'll see very similar things. They also introduced the idea of sediment collection areas. Next slide. And basically these in-basin CDFs, which is a contained disposal facility, which is a strategy that's been used in many other places, Green Bay in particular, where, I mean, when they have sometimes a huge Superfund cleanup, you have, there's a 56-acre island called Renard Island in Green Bay that's completely man-made, and it is all the nasty, horrible contamination put in a basin, and it is so well contained that the water coming in is dirtier than the water that comes out. The channelization, when we had our meetings with Eagle, we were over in Douglas City Hall. And if we were to channelize, what that's likely to do, if it's channelized before the Superfund cleanup is done, that is likely to take what is currently a contained contamination problem. The contamination pretty much stops in Kalamazoo Lake. And if we were to channelize, we would take a contained contamination problem and disperse it into Lake Michigan. And this is when Eagle said, over our dead bodies, that will never happen. So
With the channelization.
Yeah, channelization is not going to happen. anytime before the contamination problem is solved. After that, and someday in the future, maybe that's a consideration, but nobody in the community wanted that either because you really lose your lake. You have a river with wetlands, which is a very different character than what you have now. And the result of this with the community was we want our lake because that's fundamental to our character and our uses. So next slide. So we evolved this, just keep on going, it's the same, all parts of the same study here. And this introduced the concept of a sediment trap, which is a really important idea, and I'll talk about that more in just a little bit. Next slide. So one of the things that we did as a result of, this was in 2013, and we were all very concerned that we were going to have low water for 10 more years. And the question was, okay, we don't have $40 million to dredge everything. So what this plan shows, actually, I think you go to the next slide too. You'll see it on the next one. This is a better one. The idea was to identify some channels. So those blue lines and green lines where we were going to dredge channels to maintain access. And so you'll see the blue line was to 6 feet, 6 feet deep, I think. And the green was 10 feet deep. The idea being we're going to connect the marinas and the shorelines to Lake Michigan. That was the bare minimum we could do. And fortunately, you remember the Keewatin, which is sitting there at Red Dock.
Oh, yeah. That's
RJ sold Keewatin, and in the process of selling Keewatin, managed to dredge that channel and got a permit to do that, and actually built that channel for us. And that got us through that time period. Say whatever you like about RJ, he's a legend. That was a big deal. That was a very big
Oh,
deal
that
that
was
that happened. It's
smart.
a very big
Yeah.
deal for the community. So that was the idea of the I can't remember exactly what the group was called at the time, but it was what's the bare minimum? It was Bob Sapita and others. The bare minimum, how do we keep the harbor operating for the boats? And it was up to the marinas to connect to those channels. And that was that the community was theoretically going to fund these with the assumption that the water was going to remain low for 5 or 10 more years. Fortunately, the water came up, and this kind of quietly said, well, we don't have to worry about that right now. Next slide. This is the same thing, Wade's bio. Next slide. So the Douglas Waterfront Master Plan was conceived specifically for the Douglas side to figure out how they were going to generate revenue to pay for, contribute their portion. And the main point on this that relates to all of this was the idea of going back to the CDFs, the contained disposal facilities, rather than the one like in Renard Island. The idea here was to create more of natural habitats that are, it's much more of a natural environment. And we actually got Eagle to say, okay, we'll talk about it. Because they had engaged with us to the point that they recognized that you can't just say no to everything. There's only so much money. There's only so many ways to solve the problem. They weren't on board fully, but they're like, we got an absolute no to channelization. That'll be hard, but it's a conversation we're willing to engage in. And so next slide. So let's go back one. So the other part of this was to create what we call a, and it's not in this plan, but right there under the 196 bridge, or right in front of
Dick's house.
in front of the boat launch, is to create what we call a sediment trap. So the reason that Wade's Bayou is what it is and everything east of 196 is what it is that the river opens up. And so when you have a channelized river, you have a higher rate of speed of water movement, which keeps the sediments floating in the water column. And when it opens up, the water slows down and the sediments fall out of the water column. We wanted to use those physics to basically find a constriction point where we could dig a deep hole, and that would create sort of the same effect. And that hole over time would fill in with sediment. And the beauty of it is you could dredge it from the boat ramp. And the reason that's important is because it's a very affordable way to do it. You can use a long reach excavator and grab that sediment. We also looked at different strategies to do hydraulic dredging, and we talked about using the water treatment plant site as a place for, remember the volcano that was on Tower Marine? That's also called the CDF. We wanted to create one of those up by the water treatment plant. You would actually literally run a hydraulic pipe in the highway right away to get it up there. And that's a very common strategy we use. It's very cost effective, but you don't have to do that every day. The idea was to use this combination of more affordable techniques. We managed to get the estimated price of the dredging at the time from 40 million down to about 10 million, which is still an incredible amount of money, but it's a lot better than 40. And those were the strategies we talked about. But more important in this study was, let's go to the next slides, was to figure out you know, when you're in the boat and it's filling up with water, you can bail, but the proper thing to do is to start to plug the hole first. So the hole we have to plug here is where's all the sediment coming from? And what's happening is it's coming from your upstream properties, primarily farmlands, due to their size and the land management practices. And this is where it gets a little touchy because it's this point of, oh, we're blaming the farmers. But the reality is you are paying for a problem created by your neighbors up the river. And that's why I engaged the Department of Agriculture and the state and the county and everybody else. And so the idea is to look at the drains. And when we do a construction project, we have to do what's called an SCSC plan, a soil erosion sediment control plan. Every single plan that comes through your building here, it's the hay bales and the silt fencing you see around project sites.
Yeah.
Those rules don't apply to farm fields. So let's go to the next slide. So these were our strategies. Do nothing, not an option. Dredge on demand, that's what we're doing now. If we just hit panic mode, we dredge. Then we talked about sediment traps. That is a viable option. Channelization was determined not to be a viable option. And then mitigation strategies that are very important is reducing the sediment streams. If we don't do both, we're continually paying money to solve the problem that's generated on other properties. And then construct local CDFs. That was at the water treatment plant, and called it the innovative use of in-water CDFs. It's innovative for Eagle. It's not innovative in other places. This is a widely used practice in other places. Next slide. So we talked about channelization. We can keep on going. If anybody online wants to see all this, I imagine we can publish this and post it for folks, and they can call me if they've got questions. So let's keep on going. So channelization was rejected, as I said, is it's going to take a contained problem and make it a dispersed problem, which is an absolute non-starter. Let's keep on going. I said near zero, it's a zero chance. It's not happening. Sediment trap I just talked to you about is find a constricted point. The point is to have it close so I can dredge affordably from shore without having to mobilize. Every time you just mobilize a marine plant, it's called a marine plant when a big barge shows up, that's $100 grand, just, or, you know, 30 to 50 to $100,000 just to get the equipment there before you've done anything. And that's just the reality of what it takes to get that stuff. So that was what we're trying to get to. Next slide. And that location we talked about there by the boat ramp by 196.
Could you explain that a little bit more? Because I don't remember this. So when you're talking about to help the drainage, you keep it all in one place. So, and it's like on a
Yeah.
boat. So where do you put the sediment then when you dredge it?
So at this point, so that's always one of the key parts of it is whenever we do dredging of any kind, and emptying a sediment trap is dredging, which we're removing sediment from the bottom of a water body. So the multiple dredging strategies we talked about using was hydraulic dredging. That's when we literally picture a shop vac, literally sucking up the sediments, and that's what the Corps does when they do the river. And a lot of times they put it on the beach. I'm not sure if they put it on your beach here. They do.
Yeah, they know.
So,
Mhm.
yep, so
Yeah,
that's
we
the
did.
hydraulic. That's
Yeah,
hydraulic.
like
And the
the
reason we use that is it's about $10 a cubic yard. It's a very, very cost-effective approach. There's mechanical dredging, which is you're digging with a scoop. With a sediment trap, you're mechanically dredging. And so the idea was by making the sediment trap, we're going to capture some amount. We don't know exactly how much. You're certainly not going to capture all of it, but what the idea was, can we reduce the amount going into the lake by 30, 40%, 25% even, any amount, 20% significant of that 36,000 yards, I think I said the number was. If we can cut that to 20,000 yards, that's going to delay the onset of it creating a problem downstream. And it's a very cost effective because you're basically digging a hole. And so what Eagle requires us to do is test the sediment. And what we do with it depends on the results of that testing.
So dredging, we have to make sure it's still not contaminated, and we have to remove the sediment, put it somewhere else. But with the dredging like that, what do you dredge up? Does that have to go to CDF?
Eagle would require us to test it, and that would determine where it goes. So if it's fresh and clean, and what we would end up doing in this case, you would take it out, you would stockpile it, and you would test it stockpiled, and then they would say, okay, this has to go to this type of landfill. It could be clean enough for what they call a beneficial use. We have a BUD plan of beneficial use of dredge materials. And we call it dredge materials now. The word dredge spoils is now it's gone out of fashion. I'm not sure why. So we would test it, and Eagle would say, it's clean, it can be used for this use. It's this level of contamination, it can go in that use. It's so contaminated, it has to be this way. So the idea of and that's always going to be the case, no matter what we do, everywhere we go, we always have to test. And Eagle tells us where it can go. That's not our determination.
So they have tiers then, and then
Yeah.
obviously the higher the tier, the more
It's-
expensive it gets.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Okay.
so hydraulic dredging as a baseline is $10 a cubic yard, assuming it's clean, and that's taking it from one place and putting it on your beach. It's being handled one time. Here, we would have dredged it using hydraulic from here, maybe in Wade's Bay or wherever, and put it up at the plant, and it would be pumped there, just like what RJ did there, but it would be not in a prominent location. And at that point, it would be tested, and it could maybe stay there and maybe have to be capped. That's the nice thing about that location, is if it had to stay there, then it could be capped in that location.
It doesn't have to be trucked just the same, and isn't that where the high
That's-
cost was?
If we're doing, the hydraulic would get up there, and that's why it's so cheap. This would have to be trucked or barged someplace.
Yeah.
But it's still cheaper because we're not mobilizing all those other plants.
Does it have any alternative uses when you?
Depends on how clean it is. I mean, this is the funny part about all this material. It's topsoil sheeting off the farm fields.
Yeah.
So if you're a farmer, this isn't a good thing, right? So let's keep on going. I'll show you some more images about where we got with that. So sediment managed upstream, this is a big deal. So the idea was to identify the highest priority sources. And this is what USDA and the county and the state were doing, was that they know where the sediments are coming from. I'm remembering the Rabbit.
River?
Rabbit River. I don't want to state that. I remember that was one of the areas they talked about a lot. But what we do, these are called BMPs, or best management practices. This is nothing innovative. This is straight out of USDA playbook everywhere in the country. It's buffer strips, cover crops, two-stage ditches, and you work with the local county drain commission. The idea is to work with the farmers, is it's improving soil conservation, so that's of benefit to them, and finding a way to get a tax break to help them pay for it, because they are taking some percentage of their arable lands out of production. And so there is a cost to them, which is why they, of course, go to the edges. They're trying to get every last inch they can. So let's go to the next slide.
What's a two-stage ditch?
I'll show you right here. So
It's
this is
essentially-
the image below is the problem. So you see all of that mud, the chocolate milk, that's just topsoil. That's not good for anybody, and it's not good for the farmer, and it's certainly not good for you, but that's where it's coming from. At least partially, I'll say mostly. It's this, and it's the county drains. Where else is it coming from? It's all the property upstream, which is mostly farmland or drains. The strategy, the best management practice is what you see on the right, which is some amount of land along the edges. You have a vegetated strip, and the idea is that is going to hold that sediment in place, and then they can redistribute it back across their field. The two-stage ditch is all part of different water quality strategies, where we have different layers where the sediment comes in, and as it drops out, and then the water moves into a next one, and there's multiple layers where it continues to drop out. The idea is, by the time the water actually gets to the river, we want it to be as clean as possible with as little sediment as possible. So this is what we would need to help the farmers implement, and the farmers are going to go, I don't have the money for that. I'm barely keeping my head above water as it is. And of course, right now, it's even harder with all the tariffs and everything. But that's the longer term strategy. And the idea was to collaborate, not to fight with the farmers, but to collaborate with USDA and others to help them get funding so that we can offset the cost to them. Because here's the reality. We're going to spend the money doing this, or you're going to spend the money doing what you're doing. Somebody is spending the money. Money's getting spent, irrespective of who's spending it and where it's being spent. You're stuck with it. You can't stop it. It's not illegal for them to do what they're doing. And I sound like I'm blaming the farmers. I sort of am, but the reality is they're doing what they're doing because the economic pressures have set it up with that system. And we've allowed you to carry that cost. The idea is let's spend that money here, which is better for them and better for you. And it's probably a similar amount of money. So that's what we're trying to get to. And it's meant to be very collaborative with USDA and others.
So I remember there were two young ladies that were there that were talking about doing this. Was there any follow-up done? Did they have any success at all along the area where this was so bad?
I haven't heard.
Yeah.
I haven't
Okay.
heard. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here are some other strategies. These are just other ways to do it. There's a couple of dozen different ways that we solve this. And we do this in all kinds of different things. It's not just, this is exactly why construction sites have to do this. It's exactly why when you have, all the dirt and stuff that goes from your drains, that's why we have this drain goes to fish, to the lake, all those sorts of things. We're just trying to make people aware that what you're doing, I mean, I'll stop picking on the farmers for a minute. I'll talk about everybody else. Every time we dump our fertilizers on our lawns, it ends up in the lake, and that's where you get your algal blooms. So all of us, it's not just farmers, and I hope nobody out there feels like I'm beating them up. It's just the reality of the system we've built, and we need to modify it. So next slide. So why should all the communities get involved in solving this? Navigable harbor is a key element of the Saugatuck and Douglas and the township economy. This is all from 2016, so it's a little out of date, but the principle remains. At the time, it was 630 slips, generating about 8 million in economic impacts, about 84 jobs, and almost 3 million in labor income. Property values increased with access to navigable water, significantly increasing tax returns. We did a study at the time. We actually looked at real estate values, and let's go to that side. It might be on here. It's not. I'm going to get these numbers a little bit off. If you have the square foot price for a home at the time we did this was about $200 a square foot. If you could see the lake, but not access it in any way. It was about $400 a square foot if your house had access to the lake, but it wasn't navigable. So it was shallow water, but you couldn't bring a boat to it. And if your property had direct access to the lake and you could bring a boat to it, it was about $800 a square foot. So $200 if I can see it, but I'm across the street. $400 if I'm next to the water, but I can't bring a boat to my house, and $800 if I'm on it and I can bring the boat. So any amount of money invested in this that makes that land more valuable is going to generate taxable value, which is a direct benefit to everybody. But I think if we go back one slide, this is the key, is all of that economic impact isn't just going to marinas. That's all of the shops and restaurants in Saugatuck and Douglas and everywhere else. So this is why this is a problem that's, if there was, the conversation at the time was, boy, there should be an assessment of the marinas and the waterfront property owners to pay for that. Certainly there's some truth that they're getting benefit from it, but so is every other business and home and resident in the community. And that's why it is a community-wide problem, not just a marina problem, not just a waterfront homeowner problem. How we solve that and how do we make that, if at any point in time the governments choose to do some kind of assessment or some kind of tax strategy, this is the documentation that it's not just those folks, it's everybody. So next slide. So step one was regional partnership with upstream sediment management. Let's stop, plug the hole in the bottom of the boat, stop the bleeding. And it was work with the state and funding partnerships with the USDA. We begin the field work to identify priority areas and engage successful local programs. Again, we're not going to just say to the farmers, you guys solve it. No, it's a partnership with everybody. Next slide, please. Project Clarity in Holland is probably the best example. They raised over $10 million. They did all the buffer strips, cover strips, all that stuff. Huge impact on Lake Macatawa. St. Joe Watershed Conservation Partnership also did a lot of that. I should follow up on this because this was just getting going when we did this study. So there is precedent for these things at a broad regional scale. So how do they pay for it? State participation with regional reduction strategies and waterways funding. That's the Michigan DNR waterways we talked about. Grant funding, MNRTF, which is the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. What you would likely use the MNRTF for is acquiring property. And if you can acquire property, so MNRTF creates, it uses the money from the oil and gas revenues that come to the state of Michigan, and it is used to acquire properties and put them in public use for perpetuity. So let's say there was a specific parcel that was a specific source of sedimentation that was a big problem, and for whatever reason, we couldn't figure out how to get that solved. You could use MNRTF funds to potentially acquire that piece of property, and then it would be able for some other conservation group to come in and make those improvements, for example. The Fish and Wildlife Service Big Grant is really about funding marina revenues, which increases more revenues for everybody else. So not specific to funding dredging, but specific to generating more economic activity in the community. Taxes, of course, nobody likes that one. Philanthropy, I'm sure that the Project Clarity had a lot of philanthropy involved as well. Next slide. So step one, let's do whatever we can to reduce the amount of sediment coming in. Then get into here, what do we do now is the sediment management. This is back to what you're doing directly in your community, which is keep the partnerships with KLHA, figure out the Schultz Park CDF facilities, which is a permitting and design issue, preliminary engineering and verification of the sediment trap design, focus on dredging priorities. In the emergency dredging program, that's that study I showed you, which was those channels.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, we didn't realize that we were gonna hit a record at the time we were doing this. We were just coming out of record lows and everybody's like, it's coming right back. But the key is there's a lot of work to be done with Eagle. And so one of the reasons to address this now is permitting for any of this stuff. It's probably a 2-year process. And so let's just say we wanted to do it all. Since these are new strategies that aren't regularly permitted, I'm always careful. It sounds like I'm picking on Eagle. There's a number of things that are innovative strategies used in other parts of the Great Lakes that aren't currently allowed in Michigan, simply because there's no rubric for permitting. They don't have every time Eagle permits something, they create yeah, if you let him do it, everybody else is allowed to do it. So they want to make, it's precedent. That's the word I was looking for. They want to make certain that anything they allow doesn't create a precedent that they're going to have a problem with later. So they're very, very careful on the first time they're doing something new. So the point here would be the sediment trap, the in-water CDF, some other things we're talking about different shoreline treatments out in the water. They're going to take a long time, and somebody has to be the first to push that. So there's a lot of work to be done with Eagle over a long period of time, and collaborate and work with them. Next slide. And that was the end of it. So that really got it. The quick summary is everything we can possibly do working with the state and county to minimize what's coming in, and then find the most cost-effective strategies to do what we're doing now. And fortunately, our water's still holding pretty steady, and hopefully we have a little time. But if we wait until it's record low again, we're going to be in a hard way, and there's not another Keewatin to. I mean, that was talk about just the confluence of luck and timing.
Maybe we could use the houseboats.
I'm sorry. So, that's what we did then, and I mean, fundamentally, it's the same conversation I've been having. It's easy to forget about when the water's up, and it's so hard because when the water's down, it takes so long to get something permitted that you're going to have a year or two before you can actually solve it, and that's going to be a real challenge.
Greg, is there actually the possibility that we would get funding for like 10 million from the state? Does the state do that anymore?
Super fund,
Well, I think the super fund, we're step 7 on that.
like years
That's
away.
I think, I can't really answer it. I mean, I think the thing to do is to, again, it's working with the county and the USDA. It's a really broad scale, certainly looking at the upstream elements. The 10 million for what we're doing in here was really based on direct dredging. And so when you think about what dredging efforts have had to occur in the lake, okay, so the dredging that's paid for now by the Corps is the Federal Nav Channel, which
Not it.
fortunate for Saugatuck, you're not paying for that. So long as our congressional representatives keep that funding coming, the Corps is obligated to do that. When you sit down with the Corps of Engineers in Washington, and I've been to the Pentagon meeting with the top civilian rep over the Corps, he'll be like, yes, I am absolutely obligated to do that. And I will do that the moment Congress authorizes funding. If Congress doesn't authorize funding, the Corps cannot meet its obligations, and they'll tell you, yes, we're obligated. Go talk to your representative and have them send us the money. We will go do it. And fortunately, that has, Fred Upton was fantastic at it. It hasn't dropped off too badly since, which is good. I think the other strategy is really more with USDA, and that's going to take a champion to really push that forward and engage. And I think it's engaging with maybe the Michigan State Extension, and that's a broader reach, and that's a state level thing. So is Joey Andrews up here?
Yeah, correct.
I think I would probably engage with Joey Andrews. He's been fantastic along the waterfront. I think he would be a champion we should talk to. But that's the upriver stuff, I think, starts at a state and USDA and at that level in the county, in the Drain Commissioner. Once it gets to you here, fortunately, I don't think anybody's had to fund major dredging in the lake since RJ did the Keewatin dredging. Am I accurate? I don't know.
Oh,
of
the
any.
mouth of the channel,
No, but that's the federal.
That
NAV.
was the federal.
Okay.
Yeah.
But once you get past the nav channel, no, I'm not aware of anybody who's done significant dredging since the Keewatin effort.
Except the guy who bought RJ's house. He did some serious dredging to get his boats in.
So that's the deal. So and if you think about it, if God forbid the water drops 2 feet this winter, which that's certainly not projected, and if we had a navigable issue, I think you would certainly see a lot of people trying to get the band together. In St. Joe, I'll just tell you right now, the federal nav channel goes up to the second of our drawbridges, and when you get upstream of that second drawbridge, it's very, very shallow. and the county went ahead and funded permitting for dredging upstream of there, but the county just said, that's our piece. We don't have any funding. We don't even have a harbor authority, the way that others do, that with funding to do the dredging. So they said, the county said, we're gonna pay for the permitting. And anybody in that area who wants to generate funds to go do dredging, we did the permitting for you. So if you can get the money to do the dredging, you can go do it. So that is one way that there's a public-private partnership. And so that, in that particular case, it's mostly the marinas and the residents that are up there that are going to pay for that if they choose to do it. Fortunately, they haven't had to yet, but that's going to be the ultimate problem is if we don't have some kind of longer term stream, building a rainy day fund or actually a sunny day dry fund. However we get there and finding a way to create that funding stream, we're going to be stuck. And that's, I mean, it's only a matter of time until we hit record lows again. It's probably not next year. It might not be for 20 years, but sooner or later it is going to happen again. And even if it doesn't get to record lows, if the sedimentation still comes in at 36,000 yards,
Oh, it's gonna go down.
it's going to fill
Yeah.
in. So, and that'll be a situation. Marinas regularly dredge their own water bodies. But there's also issues with the way permitting works is just the legal authority to dredge all of Kalamazoo Lake is something of a challenge because of the way the riparian rights work. And so that gets to be a real challenge. And so we need, that's the beauty of KLHA is to figure out a way that on behalf of the community, who holds the permit to do the dredging. It couldn't be just Tower because Tower only has a small piece of those riparian rights, for example, and each homeowner has pieces and all of them have to sign off and say, yes, we give our permission to do those things. And so it's fairly complicated. But yeah, I think very few people would oppose it.
Greg, do you know where the line is where it's commercially navigable and so people just own, just like they do on Lake Michigan, you
Where
own
the
to
natural
where they
stop?
own to the edge of the water, and where when you get to riparian rights where people actually own, out underneath the river. Do you know where that line is?
This is the
So-
high water
Yeah.
mark.
No, it's
Not 5 feet.
it's
Mhm.
Yeah. So how there's riparian rights and riparian interests
Okay.
is how I think of it. I may not have that terminology exactly right.
Okay.
So when you're on a Great Lake, which is Lake Michigan, it's the Grand Traverse Bay, things that are considered the Great Lakes, that is state of Michigan bottomlands. And it's Chris Anchu with MDNR. He manages the program where they do bottomlands leases. And if you own that property that touches that, you're a riparian interest holder and you have the right to request a bottomlands lease through the state. And there's obligations that come along with that. Primarily, you have to, if you wanted to build something, for example, like a marina in Grand Traverse Bay, for example, Eagle's going to, in DNR, and part of that lease is if you stop actively using it for that, you have to remove it. You have to restore it back because it's public trust bottomlands. When you're on an inland lake, like Kalamazoo Lake or the river or Macatawa, those are inland lakes and you have riparian rights. You don't actually own it to the middle, but you do have the rights to that middle. And that's where that all comes. For the purposes of permitting, it's the same thing. Everybody, whoever the riparian interest holders are, the riparian rights holders are, they have to be a part of that permitting process.
And that's based upon the distance between the two shores.
It's in a lake. There's multiple ways. So determining where the riparian rights line is, it's a little bit of voodoo. And there's a number of different ways to do it. So in a big round body of water, you put a point in the middle, and where somebody's property line intersects the lake edge, from that point, you draw a pie shape to the middle point. And you have this sort of pie shaped riparian rights. If it's a river or a long linear lake, that you basically generate an artificial center line and you go from where your property line intersects the water body to a line perpendicular to that line. And so how it's done is you hire a surveyor who uses one of these several methods for determining where it is, and they make it's that surveyor's determination. It's not the same as on land where it's like 106.3 feet at bearing, whatever. I think it's this, and here's my basis for making that rationale. And you give that to your neighbors and say, this is my interpretation. And your neighbor can go, yeah, that looks good. Or your neighbor can go, no way. And then your neighbor has the right to get their surveyor to go out and do their interpretation. And then you work it out. So it's a little bit.
Build a fence between your houses.
Generally, you.
Well, I think it's more docks and people putting new docks in and.
Yeah, the dock issue.
Yeah, it's a dock issue.
Yeah, we ran
Yeah.
into it with the fire department over there in Willow Tree.
It's easier on rivers. It's pretty clear on rivers. and lakes. It always gets a little confusing. Generally, that's why, Eagle and Jack, put your stuff in the middle of your property. Don't go to the edges.
Yeah.
Whenever we're designing a marina, for example, we did a marina, for the county, on Lake Macatawa. And, the county owns property on two sides and has marina infrastructure on two sides, and there's a private home in the middle. And so there's, it's on the north side of the lake, right as you come into the lake, and we had to pull things back. And so that landowner in the middle had the ability to do the same use that we were doing on the adjacent properties. And it's very, like I said, it's a little bit of voodoo, but it is a pretty linear process. Fundamentally, with riparian rights, you come to an agreement with your neighbor, and if there's a big disagreement, there are processes that surveyors use, but it's not as precise when you're in the water as it is on land.
So what are our next steps?
I would think the next steps, really first one, I think if we want to champion the idea of a collaboration and upstream is finding everybody. Yeah, maybe it's the folks that were here last time with the water quality. That's a countywide thing up there, and it's a little challenging for you because you're not up there. It's really more of a county with a drain commissioner, maybe with Joey Andrews, with USGA, with DNR and Eagle and others, and get back to that strategy. That's, I think, a path that should be followed. And then I think fundamentally from on this end is if you wanted to start doing any of these other things, you really need to generate a revenue stream. Like for us to just say, we're just going to go out and build a sediment trap tomorrow, that's probably not the ideal first step. We would want to have we really need to have a broader consensus on how this is our sediment management plan. We want to work with Eagle and go, we intend to do all these things. And we were doing that in 2016 to some extent. And then we hit record high waters, and understandably other priorities came up, and that's the nature of life, right? We all do it. So, I think the nice thing with the upstream thing is that's not, other than the cost of the research and the meetings and doing all that, you wouldn't be expected to necessarily generate funding to implement those things. I think it would be more of let's find their best management practices. And I think I think there would be a grant funding with USDA to do those things and work with the farmers and other landowners, not just farmers, but all the landowners to implement those strategies. And then we need to somehow find a path to generate a sustainable funding source somehow.
Do you have recommendations, because we're not necessarily experts in that field, of a consultant that would be able to say, here are ways that a tri-community, because we're not just one, a tri-community can approach revenue funding? I think you mentioned a hotel tax, a room tax might be a possibility, but somebody who really knows what they're doing beyond what we do, so we can have proposals that we can give to each one of the communities saying, here's why it's important. We need to establish this revenue stream. Here's what we need money wise. Here's ways we can do it.
Yeah. Anything you do to generate revenue is going to be controversial. So I think maybe that's an MED. I mean, I think that's something I could research. I think maybe that's an MEDC thing.
Yeah.
I think I might ask Joey Andrews about that. He might have some ideas. I think I would talk to the Drain Commission. The Drain Commissioner is going to say, here's my funding sources. I think that's something we can engage the county with and just try to start to navigate that process.
To me, there's going to be some kind of a tax form, whether we call it a tax or not a tax. It's going to have to be something like that, whether it be a millage or whatever, but millages.
Something,
And each community is going to have to handle it on their own somehow and come up.
Yeah, because I know when you do the fire department, well, it covers all of this. When you do the schools, it covers all of this, but we don't cover everything, even though we represent those communities. So
I've got a few ideas. Let me talk to MEDC. Remember Ryan, Ryan Kilpatrick used to be in Douglas. I think he went to, I think he's more in housing, but there's folks like that who are more tied in. And there's another gentleman I work with who does a lot of TIF funding. And I work with some other consultants that do a lot of brownfield funding. So let me just do a little research with those folks and just I'll try to come back next month with some brainstorming, some ideas of their thoughts.
Yeah, because whatever we do, we're going to probably have to have some matching funds. If we do get grants, if we do get this, we're going to have the money there to say, okay, we're going to put 500,000 towards this, and they're going to give us 2 million or however it works.
Yeah, I think, and another thing is it probably makes sense to do, it's been almost 10 years since we did the last sort of, I think a proper economic impact analysis, probably the economic impact study I did was based on, it uses what's called the AMI Marina Economic Impact Calculator. And that's, there's an organization, a national organization called the Association of Marine Industries, and they fund that. And so I could do that. That's relatively easy. All I have to do is ask all of the marina operators to just give me their gross revenues. And it's beneficial to them. I'm not asking, and I can input those gross revenues into that calculator and it will come back with an economic impact. And that's independent. That comes from that's the College of William and Mary and the University of Florida data. And it gives you that data and its taxes by district and everything else. That would be helpful information to do that. But I would also think a proper economic impact analysis beyond that, because it's more than just that, it's the real estate values. And I think it's a demonstration and an education of the community that the economic impacts go beyond the first 50 feet past the shoreline. So,
Interesting. It'd be nice to know how many transient boaters we get on a busy weekend. That's gotta be part of it too.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
You
it
could
is
tell
very,
us by,
and that's what the economic impact calculator does, is it calculates that because, and that, again, I think that tool is it's sort of a blunt instrument. I think probably a really detailed, and I work with a gentleman who does recreation economic impacts. It's specifically around recreational benefits. And let me chat with him about what he would recommend. But I think it's a lot of education that it's not just the marine owners and the water and the people right on the water. It's every restaurant, shop, and every business in town and all that. So I think that would be worthwhile as well. So people can recognize the value and you can say, this is why we're doing this and how we're going to build some kind of a structure. And of course, nobody likes more assessments and revenue and taxes and everything, but it is only a matter of time before you have a crisis again and there's not another Keewatin.
How long would it take to get something like that done? Only because we're gonna be looking at our priorities coming up in January, I think, or something. And I know this is not on any list we have.
I could probably get a cost estimate to do the economic impact study in that
Yeah.
time frame.
Okay.
I'll just, his name is Christian Better. I'll get a number from him in the next couple of weeks, just so you at least have a number in mind. You would obviously go through an RFP process and you wouldn't just hire him direct. There's other folks who do this work. But I can at least get a ballpark of what a budget he would recommend for that type of study.
Thanks.
Greg, in your experience, and I think I brought this up in a couple meetings ago about the amount of dead catfish and it was like record. I mean, they were just filled. So I called the DNR and they recognized that there is an issue and that they were I'll follow up with them to do a study because there are 3 either threatened or endangered species. Because when I put in my permanent lift, they told me I couldn't put it in during this period of time because of the sturgeon spawning area. So have you seen where we could get funds if they determine that, hey, there's, during fluctuations, because he did say that we reached record temperatures in July, and that might have contributed.
Obviously, the shallower the water, the warmer it gets.
Right.
I would argue when we had the conversation with Eagle in 16 about the in-water CDF, I had made the point that, listen, if we don't do anything and the water silts in, that is also going to remove sturgeon habitat. So there's a certain depth of water where the sturgeon ought to be. And so, the fact that they're here in some ways is partially because it's artificially maintained at certain depths. So all of those things I think are all valid. And that's exactly the rationale we want to use. We want to focus on rationale that's like, look, we have a broad goal of supporting these endangered species. Therefore, this is directed towards that. We have a broad goal of water quality. And those things all make perfect sense. We have a broad goal. I mean, the stuff about the border strips around US, those are best management practices that have been around forever. And that's all very beneficial. So we're not coming out with new crazy things. So I think those would all be valid to talk about and potentially something that could be grant funded. So
Okay.
or at least
Yeah.
help us in the permitting process as a rationale. And to talk to DNR Fisheries, Matt, Diana in particular, those folks really know what they're doing. And there's other biologists that we work with who really, really understand that. And, you know, we want to, anything that we want to do here should be focused. Yes, recreation is a key component, but it's also protecting those resources.
Does the brown, any of the brownfield grants, are they ever used for dredging?
Typically not. Typically, the brownfield grants are used for like the Hayworth site with that plume to clean up that type of upland contamination. Probably because once it touches the water, it's automatically in a Superfund area of concern. So they're going to be like, nope, that's Superfund money. We're going to use our money over here. But the nice thing about with TIF, brownfield TIF is brownfield funds are TIF. It's tax increment financing. You're all familiar with that. If anybody in the community wants an explanation of that, I got a little 5-minute lecture on that. But again, that's why it's used in upland areas, because you're generating new tax increment. It's using that to help fund those cleanup, which makes it very difficult for a developer to develop a site if it has to pay for that. So, but the experts we work with, Roman Wilson at Fishbeck and Kirk Perschbacher, those two know everything there's to know about brownfield funding, and I could ask them for some feedback. They're working with us at Tower. So. Lots to do, but this is really the heart of the matter. It's a dedicated funding stream. We've got good strategies. So
Yeah, well, we're looking for something that we can really get our teeth into and have the direction we need. That's why you're here.
what I'm going to do for you next time, I'll come back. One, I'll get a ballpark estimate of this economic impact study, a detailed one, and then I'm going to do some research on different strategies to look at sort of examples of collaborative efforts with USDA, and some of those examples we talked about, following up on what's been done, and potentially contacting, Joy Andrews' office and others to just see what we can do.
It would really be helpful, I think, too, to have almost like a to-do list, starting probably at the easiest would be the upstream, and then moving on down, so that when we go to present it to our different boards, we can say, well, here's kind of where we're at right now, and these are the things to get us to here. But in order to do that, we have to have that funding source. So let's have a little money up here to take care of the economic impact analysis, and maybe a grant to work with the USDA on the upstream things. If you could do like a structure.
Work on that.
Okay.
Yep. Perfect.
When you say next time, when is the next time?
That's on our agenda to figure that out.
I feel like I come here and I hijack your meetings.
Yeah,
That's just
This has
fine.
been great.
that's great. All right. Any other questions for Greg?
This is so funny because then after this, we were talking about flooding on.
Oh, yeah, it's all over Butler down there.
Oh, yeah.
I said back up into this, high water and low water, in the middle, everybody's taking a deep breath and trying to recover.
Yeah, I
So they don't think that you're causing all this, I guess.
think-
Well, thanks, Greg.
Well,
Safe travels.
Well, don't leave. He can stay.
Yeah,
You may
please,
come back.
yeah.
Just next thing on the agenda is an update on the December 2nd meeting that encouraged one of us to attend. So I did attend that meeting. It's not real magical. It's sort of like this, just normal, regular people. But it was a really good meeting for me to be at because the DNR was there, and they had about 5 of them at the meeting to talk about what the funding, they had these things that they funded through their grants. And he was giving sort of a year-end analysis and just results of what has, positively resulted. So it was great to see. And they did a slide thing of all the different things they did along the lake that they funded the improvements of. And so it was very concrete. You could see, okay, here is the grant, here is the result. A lot of things to do with, mostly boating. A lot of things about, improvement of ramps, like we talk about Schultz Park or even Union Street. Parking, they address that when we were talking about parking, that they really helped different communities increase the ability for the boaters to be able to have a place once they put their boats in to park. And they also did things just like even fuel stations. They redid those, so there were a lot of things that, okay, I know we're focusing and should be focusing, on the siltation and the dredging. But these are kind of practical things that we can make application for, and different improvements for each community that we can do. I was really fortunate that I was the only person in the audience, which was a surprise to me. So when I walked into the room, they're like, "Who's he?"
Yeah.
And so they were all very interested. Who
Yeah,
are you?
that's good.
Where are you from? What are you about? And so put us on the radar screen.
Nice.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Very interested in talking to communities. That's
Yeah.
what they're there for.
Oh, they were great. They were great. My only thing is that the meeting went on a very long time and I couldn't stay, I was there for about an hour and a half and I had to leave. And I know Greg had mentioned that you wanted me to meet Kurt Wemple. I just met him briefly with a hello, meeting started and there was no opportunity for me to follow up with him. But
Were there any things that they funded and that were completed that would be something that we would want to do with this?
I think when you're talking about the Union Street ramp, I
Mhm.
think that's something they could really help out with, especially the parking issue.
Okay.
I think as far as Douglas goes with,
Schultz Park or so.
or that, or sorry, to say to you, that's Union Street actually is also tough.
Well, the reason
Sorry.
the reason,
Access sites, which is there for boat ramps and grant aid funded marinas. And so that particular, obviously DNR covers a lot more than that, but that particular organization,
Right.
What's called waterways funding is boating access sites and marinas, and that's why it's really focused on this.
Yeah.
so I went back over the management plan and it said that in June of 2016, MDEQ and Michigan Department of MDNR visited Sagatuck and determined that Coughlin Park and the Sagatuck Dinghy Dock would qualify as a public facility, making the harbor eligible for state funding. So would we be able to like maybe apply for a grant to increase our shoppers dock?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, that would
That'd be
probably,
something.
because they were also talking about focusing on, what do you call it, small,
Paddle boards?
paddle crafts, yeah.
Watercraft is what waterways is
They
there
do.
for
Yeah.
specifically.
And they do have a focus on that, so
And
those can be.
I would agree that it is a higher bang for buck to build a paddlecraft access site and a boating access site than it is to build a marina. You put more people on the water with those facilities at a lower cost than building a marina at $35,000 or $40,000 a slip.
And they are proposing to do licensing for those crafts. It won't be a big fee, but there's a lot of canoes, kayaks, windsurfer. There's so.
Paddle boards, I don't know if
So
paddle
they're
boards are
trying
part of it.
to actually get that in place so that they have a revenue stream now then to be able to do these things.
The rationale behind that, I'm behind that. I wrote a study we did a statewide facility harbor assessment in 2020, 2019. And we generated an estimate of capital improvement costs over the next 20 years. For all the systems, the boating exercise, the marinas and everything else. And it's a very large number. And it's like, don't quote me, but it's 700 million or something like that. And we were looking at what the shortfall is, and then we looked at the rationale, why is it that way? And it's really about modernizing the licensing. They haven't increased the boat registration costs since 1994. And if they had just done a cost of living on those, that would have covered the vast majority or a large part of the shortfall. And then they have this odd thing with a pontoon boat. Remember what pontoon boats used to be? Grandpa's 16 footer with a 6-horse on it. And now you can get a 24-foot pontoon boat with twin 300 on it.
Yeah.
Modernizing the registry, so the registration fee for a pontoon boat of any kind was like $13. It's just silly. And so treating those as regular boats. And then the last one was the paddlecraft. And the reason that's very specific why the paddlecraft should be paying, just like everybody else. I have a little open big sailboat or sunfish. You've all seen all of those sunfish, all the sailboats have to be registered. And it's like $8 or $10 here. It's not a big number.
It's like every 3 years though.
It's
Every
it's
three,
certainly-
yeah, yeah.
We're not talking about. I mean, it should not. Nobody should be like, oh, that's an onerous cost to me.
No, it's.
And people are like, oh, well, I have 6 paddleboards. Okay, so it's going to cost you $40. It's not a big number. But what's happening and why this is important to DNR is there are huge impacts on the boating access sites. And there's actually fistfights in the parking lots because now car toppers and the paddlecraft are using the voting access sites legitimately, they have a right to. But they're built around boats and cars and trailers, and then they're
Right.
putting all the parking spots. And so you have all these users who are using the voting access site, but don't have any registration fees, so they're using it, but they're not really paying into the system. And so it's a very legitimate rationale. I think that's something that Waterways is, we
Yeah.
suggest they evaluate. I think it's completely reasonable. We all have to pay for all of us.
Yeah. Do you know what it's based out of? I mean, when we buy a car here in the state of Michigan, it's based, I think, on the value. And that's how they do that. Do you know what they do with boats?
And small boats, it's just gonna be a fixed number.
Line
Okay.
item, yeah.
But like bigger boats, like, just a
Bigger
cabin
boats
cruise.
based on value.
Oh, okay.
I'm not 100% sure. I know I pay a lot more for my sailboat than I do for my ski boat versus what I don't pay for my, I get like $8 for my, for my sunfish, it's a tiny
Right.
number. So I think it's based on value or length or something, whatever we're called typically. I just know that they haven't increased the rates in a very long time, and it was set in 1994, and you just have to have a cost of living. We just keep falling behind, and of course, recently the cost of living has gone,
So anyway, they were looking for, they're going to be doing, their grant applications have to be in for the project that they want to do for next year. April 1st is going to be the deadline for that. So I wish the other managers were here because I think each community should maybe put that on their radar screen to, what is it we would like to have in our community? What would Saugatuck like to be improving that they could get funding for this? And Douglas, we know what they could be. The township, there is Hacklanders Landing, which is a DNR site to put in that certainly could use some improvement. That, the township could work on that and come up with some proposals of what you want. And then let's get those grant applications in and see if we can score a few.
Great.
Yeah. So anyways, that was that was really interesting to go to that meeting. Okay, next line of business was the review of bylaws. Brian, did you have some suggestions on that?
This was kind of a, carryover from your last meeting and some of your discussion about, board members, what roles you have, and then, what duties you all wanted to kind of share as the, commission doesn't have staff support essentially. So I think part of this was there was a desire to look at the bylaws and see if there was any specific duties that were laid out in there. Obviously as chair, I appreciate the chair put together the agenda for today and kind of got things together, and we compiled it and got things out to you and are obviously hosting. Probably still a gap on like who's your secretary? Do you want them to be the one that's taking minutes and preparing those draft minutes for your future review and discussion? So that's essentially what the ask was to kind of review those bylaws, make sure you're all familiar with them. Are there any changes that need to be made? And then what roles and duties do you want to have going forward? It looks like yearly you kind of pick chair, vice chair, secretary. So it's kind of a ripe discussion because next month maybe you'd
Yeah, it would be the annual time to do that.
Yep.
So, and it would be good, in my opinion, that we do have a secretary. I think Holly used to do that way back when she would take the minutes. So.
That was after my time.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and somehow it got taken over by I don't know if it was Daniel that did that, or
Well, I think
I
it
think
happened
it
a long
did.
time ago.
did it happen before that? Okay.
Yeah, because we used to pay our clerk to take the
take the-
minutes when all the years that we hosted it
Uh-huh.
in Douglas.
That's nice.
Yeah, that would be really nice.
I mean, I like it this way, but I don't know if the municipalities are feeling they're burdened by that,
That's just one additional piece. It does take some time. Obviously, we do have some extra tools now with AI helping to come up with some, it'll take this video and we can ask it to do some summaries of the presentation today and your comments and your discussion that you've had. And so that at least helps plug in the gaps. But if you have a formal secretary that also wants to take that on, I won't be upset. I'll say that.
because the bylaws do stipulate we should have a secretary.
Mhm.
So whether that secretary has specific duties or just is there a name only, I don't know. But
I would have no problem taking the minutes. I have no clue how to turn it into AI and do that, but I'd gladly take the minutes. So,
There you go.
So maybe that's something we could submit to, you know, or then you could, just like you do when I submit the agenda, you make it look pretty and.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I was surprised when I started going through all the bylaws of our different commissions, looking at, because we have new members of our board to switch around. So these bylaws stipulate that each municipality has 2 representatives.
Mhm.
We had 3. Only one could be an elected official. All 3 of us were elected
Right.
officials. So that's why we're changing things.
Reorganizing a little.
But do we have an at-large member?
We did, I didn't. That's how we got to
I
7.
don't know if that was one of
Yeah.
the Douglas
think
folks.
that-
I think
asking
Douglas
for the at-large.
Douglas did have an
I
at-large
think
member
that was
because
their-
that's how we got to 7, because
Well-
we'd be 2, 2, and 2, that'd be
It
6.
stipulates that the at-large member must have ownership, residence, or business interest in the land abutting the lake. So that'll be something to consider too when we.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
how many people does it say? Was it 5 or 7?
We each can have 2 and then 1 at-large.
So that's 5.
7.
Well, no, because if you go back, the township is listed in,
That was another thing I was going to just bring up.
Township what?
is not part of the ordinances.
Well, but I thought we changed that.
We talked about it.
Yeah,
I
but
don't,
just
I don't think
never
we
did.
ever voted on a bylaw change, which is what I was going to bring up, that we should vote on a bylaw change to add the township.
Yeah,
So-
township.
So legally, I'm here.
Okay.
So, and I think it outlines the process
Mhm.
that we come up with at a meeting, we come up with the verbiage that we want to change. That change gets out to each member, and then at that next meeting, it gets voted on, and that bylaw change. It's pretty simple.
I'll do the minutes if you do that,
Okay,
put that verbiage.
okay. I will do
And then
that.
we'll vote on changes to because the other pieces that I saw, do we do an audit every year? Do we do an audit?
Don't
every
have any
What
money.
are they going to audit?
That's in there.
Good point. yeah.
That's in there. There's supposed to be an audit and then we're supposed to have an annual report.
Well, I could come up with that. It's gonna be a lot of zeros.
Yeah, we have to do an independent financial audit. And there was another one here that I was going.
Like an annual report, kind of like we do our DDA reporting.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah. Conduct an annual independent financial audit of the authority in accordance with the Budget Act. Should be pretty simple. 0, 0, 0.
Yeah.
We have a fiduciary
Do we-
responsibility to keep all of the authority monies. We're doing good.
Mhm. We haven't lost a penny.
There was another one that I saw. Maybe that's it.
Okay. Well, we'll work on those changes and propose the changes at the next meeting. Which leads us to unfinished business, next meeting date. What do we think?
Well, I will no longer be on it, so it doesn't matter to me.
How many do we want to do a year?
We had proposed quarterly.
Yeah.
We were doing this a little more frequently because Greg was getting us up to speed on everything and giving us certain goals that we wanted to meet.
Before we used to meet like April through October.
I think we should meet, if we're gonna work on
Yeah,
having the
grant,
communities for
right.
the grant for April, we might want to have a meeting prior to that, so we can present each municipality's wish list, and then we can work on saying, okay, how are we gonna get those grant applications in by April 1st?
Well, that might be something we go to our boards too and say, we all have things we want to do, but we need a grant writer.
Yes, we do.
So could we hire one grant writer to write 3 grants? Maybe us for the shopping dock, you for whatever. And we haven't even talked about the shopping dock with the city council. So that's just an idea throughout there.
Yeah.
Because the leases are up for transient boating. But I don't know how to write a grant.
No,
mean,
I don't think
we
anybody,
need a
no, we need a
grant
grant writer, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and Greg might have some suggestions. Greg might be
Well,
able
there
to
you
do
go.
that for us.
With voting specifically, we work with grant us.
When's our money gonna run out with you? Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we're gonna have to ask for some more funding to pay Greg.
Those are very much specific in our wheelhouse with that, building engineering studies, and sorts of things with them.
So, let's see, so should we do like a February meeting?
It's awful cold in February.
And it's also close to Christmas now, but we're
Yeah,
here.
but if we put it off to March, then,
We don't get the grants in.
yeah, we want to at least get something in.
I would recommend that you identify some grant projects that make some sense.
Mhm.
And let's try to do that in early January, and then maybe I make a phone call to Kurt Wemble and just say, here's some ideas that we have, what sounds good to you.
Okay.
He's gonna have some feedback on, yeah, this fits into our initiatives this year maybe. And then we review those in early February, and then it gives us till, because every grant application in the state comes out in April 1, and so it's a big push for that time period. So you'll want, I would say maybe the week of February 8th to have a meeting where we're all in support of what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Makes some sense.
Good with me.
that'll give us some time then. We do.
Except I'm
To raise some money.
Except I'm going
Yeah.
away to San Miguel, just on the 8th.
Oh, on the 8th, you'll be in San Miguel? Yeah.
On my way, yeah.
Okay,
Not that you have to make your schedule around me, but.
well, we probably will.
So
Would the first week then work in February?
what date would that be?
Uh, because,
First, yeah,
Yeah.
the first Tuesday, the 3rd?
yeah,
3rd would work for me. Does that work for everybody else?
Yep.
You're not gonna be here.
I'm gonna be in Florida. so.
yeah.
We're all running to warmer climates. February 3rd, does that
3rd.
work for you?
So, I mean, I can probably call in, but I can visit the week, I'll be in Florida.
Okay,
So I can be I can do any week after that. That's just my last conflict is that first week in February.
yeah, and like I said, I won't be back until, it's gonna be like the 8th, I'm gonna be back like the 18th. So it
Well, we
would take
can-
us to the end of the
We
month.
could do it on the 3rd if he can do a Zoom.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
great.
all right.
All right, let's say the 3rd. All right, cool. So we got that. And then just, I think the thing to bring to that meeting, which we're already on our way to, is our goals for 2026. And it sounds like we've kind of established some of them right now.
Mhm.
What we need to do, we need to work on
Yeah,
an
economics.
economic study
Yeah,
and a
impact
funding
study.
stream and projects that each one of the communities would like to see happen for potential grants.
Yeah.
Okay, economic study, what was?
What was the
second one?
first one?
Economic study,
Economic
economic impact study, and the second one,
revenue stream.
Revenue.
I'm taking that memory thing, it's just not working at all. Revenue stream. And then the list of
Need a grant
projects.
writer.
And then we need a list of
Yeah.
projects.
Yep,
And then also Greg was gonna kind of maybe do a how to move forward.
Step by step, yeah.
To-do list.
yeah.
To-do list.
Okay.
Cool. All right. I go away feeling we're really doing something. It makes me excited.
Well, and I have to tell you, you saying that you were the only person that showed up and they were so excited to see you, that means they're gonna be watching for us maybe a little bit.
I think they are. I think they
Yeah.
are. They're expecting, I told them, expect something coming down the road from us. So I want to make sure we feed them something.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to tell the Douglas folks that if we can get it on their agenda the next
Yep,
time.
I will.
And then if you could get it on the agenda for the city and then somebody's got to tell Daniel.
Yeah, I can follow up with an email tomorrow just to let folks know the next meeting date that was selected so they can get that calendared and.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, if each council can get it on their agenda to see what it is they want to zero in on, that would be great.
Well, and that, by that time, we'll have an idea of where we're at with Greg's amount of money. if we're gonna have to ask for more or what.
We probably will.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would-
I'm feeling like, okay, that money can't still be going out there.
Well, I mean, it's gonna cost us to do something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, it's silly to think that we can, I mean, we've been working on this since.
Well, we're a toothless tiger without,
Yeah.
without funding. So
Mr. Chair, if I could ask Greg, what's the, is there a match amount typically on the waterways commission grants?
Yeah, it varies by community sometimes.
Oh, shoot.
I think it's 75-25 is, like 25% or 50% would be the most common.
Okay.
So I'll talk to Kurt about, it varies depending on
Yep.
on the study type, so. I'm also gonna look into coastal zone management grants, which might be appropriate for some of the broader upland regional studies.
Mhm.
It might be a little bit of a stretch because we're kind of going up the river, but certainly in the basin here fits into those, so I'll look at a bunch of those as well.
great.
Yeah, the one through Eagle, are you referring to?
They've got 3 or 4 different types.
Yeah, we just were awarded one, the township's putting in for a project for 2027, so we've had a lot come from our region at least, but hey, if they're willing to keep giving us money,
In particular, because this I mean, it's a coordinated effort among 3. I mean,
Yep.
This is the kind of thing they like, is a really coordinated effort that has a higher,
Yeah.
broader impact on one little place. I think that will help, but I'll get some feedback from them. They're very helpful and sharing with us what would help us be more successful.
Another big partner that you have is just a, reminder, and Greg kind of pointed to it as well. So the Outdoor Discovery Center that's kind of helping with the Kalamazoo River Greenway, like those upstream impacts, like, and its impacts on our greenway is certainly on their radar. I mean, they're the ones that help do a lot of the work with Lake Macatawa and that watershed. And so one way or another, I think somebody will be focusing and helping those processes.
I think our last non-meeting we had when they were there, when both Greg and them were talking,
Yep.
all of a sudden they're realizing there's all this overlap.
Yep.
That they really should be, we should be working
Working.
together.
Spot on. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly right.
And they would seem like the logical organization to work with the people that are contacting the farmers along the river.
Yep,
Yeah.
they talk exactly about that, about building those relationships. It took a lot of relationship building and a lot of conversations in Ottawa County and that
think
they
the
want to do
original
that here. Yep.
The original idea, they were gonna go back and check each parcel along the river, who owned what, and then talk to those farmers directly.
Yep.
I don't think that ever happened, but that was, quite a few years ago.
Sure.
So we'll want to make sure we keep that relationship going with the ODC. For sure, let them know
Yeah.
what we're up to, say we're anxious to hear what they're up to
Mhm.
and working together. All right. All right, well, we'll move on to 9, which is committee reports, and I don't think we have any active committees at the moment that are doing anything. So I think we can just move on to the manager. Wait, do we have, what am I missing? Committee reports, Douglas Harbor Authority. We usually go around the table. That comes at the,
We
okay.
don't really have anything. We're not going to meet again until March and at
Oh,
that time we're
February.
going to
Oh,
begin our pavilion work and things done
oh.
at this marina, but nothing till then.
Nothing, okay.
And we
Manager
don't have
report then?
Manager report.
Yeah, just on the milfoil front, since your last formal meeting, our city council approved another year of milfoil treatment with
Oh.
aquatic doctors, and sounds like maybe some of the regulatory requirements may be changing a little bit. So there was an ask maybe to get things in for treatment for next year. So that's been approved, and otherwise we're looking at some boardwalk kind of concrete repairs and seawall repairs in certain areas, chain ferry landings. I mean, that connects certainly to the harbor. That's some work that'll be going out to bid as part of the overall Maple Street project. There's kind of some optional add-ons to see if we can get some economies of scale with a contractor that'll already be in the area, kind of a thing. So that's all I had.
So is Maple Street going to kick off next year?
That we just met last week and went over the plans in detail with all the different partners, and yeah, we should have that hopefully out the bid next week.
Nice.
So, and
Yeah.
still on track for spring construction.
It's needed.
Yeah, no doubt. Yep.
Great.
Yep.
All right, and no other managers. So public comment? I hear none. Authority member. When we start on this side of the table, and do you have any
I have no other comments.
No other comments?
No, none for me. Great meeting.
It was a good meeting, that's all.
And that's it? Okay. I like it. I think things are going in a really positive direction and looking forward to the February 3rd meeting. So if there's no other comments, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And Greg, thank you very much.
Yeah, great.
Really appreciate it.